Good evening, everyone, and welcome. This is our good friend, Tom French. I'm Andrew, and we're here to have a chat about Tom's new book. And our real heart is that this little series we plan to do four will be to build up preachers in the month of October. And we're keen to chat with Tom everything about preaching and youth ministry. And so here we are. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. Were you welcoming me or people on the...
Welcoming you and the listeners.
Great.
So, Tom, where are you right now?
I am sitting in my study in Parkville in Melbourne.
Ooh,
Yeah.
excellent. And I'm in my study in Glenhaven in Sydney. But yeah, good to be together. So, Tom, I just got sent this in the mail yesterday from Coorong, Talks That Suck.
Yeah, that's what I do.
That don't suck. And how long has this book been out?
Actually, a month of the day of recording. So 10th of October. Oh, no, September. 10th of September it came out.
Yeah, awesome. And this is your second book?
It is, yeah. The first one was Weird, Crude, Funny and Nude, The Bible Exposed.
And how has that guy gone?
It's pretty good. I've never written a book before that, so I was like, I don't know what I should expect, but it seems to have gone all right. People like it and are reading it, and people keep buying it, so I'm happy.
What's one encouraging kind of feedback you've had just from someone that's read that guy?
I think hearing about particularly young boys who are reading it, and so they're often not that interested in reading books or not that interested in reading the Bible, and they'll read that book and get excited about some of the stuff that's in the Bible. Like that's always encouraging. Hearing that story.
Nice. Now, good to hear. But this book that's now come out, tell us the heart of how, what led you? Why did you write this book?
I wrote it because when you're doing youth ministry, which I've been doing for a while, there's and you want to train people in how to do talks. There's often resources out there, and they're just really difficult to get into. And I wanted something that was really simple that you could give to a youth leader, and say they might not have any training in how to do a Bible talk, and you can read this book from start to end. It'll take you through step by step. Doesn't get too in depth. Doesn't there's not heaps of dense theology in there. There's a quick kind of theology of preaching, but I want to just keep it kind of fun and interesting and moving so that you can go from beginning to end, everything you need to do. And then after that, hopefully if you got excited, then you can go into all those other books that go more in depth and, because people who are smarter than me have written those ones.
Yeah, no, I like it. Like I said, I just spent an hour with it this morning, but I immediately thought, oh man, this is something I could give all my youth leaders rather than a 200, 300 page, book on preaching that's a bit overwhelming, just sits on their bookshelf or sits on their desk. I can see this guy literally they can work through it, and then when they write their first talk and go back to it just with just how to kind of begin to step into if they have that challenge of writing a talk.
Yeah.
Lovely. So, talk us a little bit about the journey. I guess about you. Let's talk about you. People want to get to know Tom French. Some people know you a little bit, a big bit. What's your journey of preaching looked like? When did you first do a talk, and then what's it look like since then?
Well, I didn't. When I first got the opportunity to talk, I didn't do a talk. So I was at my church, they gave me a service to run once, and I was so terrified of preaching that I just played a piece of classical music and told people to think about God, which is probably the worst talk I've ever done.
Let me come back.
Yeah. But then I started working in youth ministry, and because of that, I needed to do some talks. I think it was 2002 that I started speaking, and I was running an evening service at my church, so I had to preach there, and I think that was the main place where I was speaking when I started, was actually preaching in church. And no one gave me any kind of training. So I just had to figure it out for myself. And I'd been this, my plan for my life had been to be a filmmaker. So I'd been doing a lot of script writing and stuff, which looking back on the scripts now, they weren't that good, but my brain was in like story mode, and like how do you write a film script, and how do you find like the themes and the through lines and build tension and all that kind of stuff. So that's what was in my head. And so when I moved into preaching, like I was like, oh well, I'm just going to be thinking about it like telling this story. And so that's kind of where things came from. And then I just kind of started watching other people preach. When I first went to Soul Survivor in 2003, and I saw Mike Pilavachi preach for the first time, and I was like, oh, this is great. Like because he was fun and he was funny, but he was really good at kind of engaging with the Bible and applying it to your life. Yeah. And the whole thing, I was just like, this is amazing. This is what I want to do. So he, like, listening to him was great training, because I hadn't had any training. So listening to him, I was like, oh, there's a good way to preach. And so, I think it wasn't until I'd been preaching for like 7 or 8 years that I actually did a course on how to preach.
Yeah.
So I was just figuring it out for myself and watching other people.
Yeah, no, good. So this book, Talks That Don't Suck, who's it for? Who should read it?
So particularly it's like aimed at like youth leaders. So I wanted it to be like, the most helpful would be like the 19-year-old who's just been asked to lead at youth group, and then they've been given their first talk and they're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. So there's like the youth leader, and then beyond that, maybe a new youth pastor. Like when I first started leading a youth group, I'd been a youth leader a bit, but I didn't really know what I was doing. And then they kind of threw me into it. I didn't know what I was doing. So then I wrote it for me in 2002. So the brand new youth worker who doesn't know what's going on. And then probably the last group of people is not the people who probably maybe people who've got plenty of experience in preaching, but may be like, oh, now I've got to preach to teenagers and I have no idea how to do it. And so they probably don't need to read the whole book, but there's a few bits about like, how do I engage with teenagers, and do I need to be funny and things like that. So they're the other group that the book's aimed at.
No, that's good. I think the content is laid out really well. So you can pick it up and read one section that will re-spark for someone. I really appreciated, as I was looking this morning, you mentioned the classic line, we only retain 5% of what we hear. And, that then triggered for me like, talk's important. And you go on to talk about this in the book. So like, why is it important that we still do talks on Friday nights or at church? Like, is it still important?
Yeah. And I think it's important because like preaching for some reason is a way that God has decided to work. Like all the way through the Bible, you see that preaching comes up again and again and again. And so you have like the prophets are preaching. You have Jesus is a preacher. Like he says, I've come to preach. You see the apostles go and preach. And then you see throughout church history, people are preaching and God is working and lives get changed through preaching. I think the difficulty comes because we have a different idea about what preaching should be doing. And so we think that it should be like, oh, you've got to be able to retain and remember everything you hear in a sermon or a youth group talk, whatever it is. You don't have to remember it all. The point is that there's at some point where God works on your heart and applies the word to your life, and you get changed by it. And it can be like a little change that you might not even notice. Like we get shaped by years of listening to preaching, and sometimes there's a really big thing, and like your life changes overnight. But the point isn't that you know everything that's been said. You don't have to remember all the illustrations or all the points. All you need is for God to be at work in your heart. And so, like, the goal of preaching isn't retention or information. There's a saying that lots of people love. It's not about information, it's about transformation. And I'm completely on board with that. And so if people only remember 5% of what I say, that's totally fine, because it doesn't even matter if they remember nothing, just as long as the Spirit's at work.
No, that's very helpful. I think that just, great little summary for us. I want to go on a little side note just to bring us into the world of Tom, a little story that I'd love to hear for you. Like, what's been one of the most intimidating times you've had to do a talk?
Oh, so, like, there are some times when you have to speak which are like just big, like, they're significant moments. So like preaching at a funeral, preaching at a wedding, like those kinds of things are like, they're intimidating. But I think probably when I first was having to do talks, like Bible talks in high schools, and you would be in front of a bunch of kids who have had very little exposure to the Bible, are totally not interested, and your job is to share about what the Bible teaches and share the good news of Jesus with them. Like, that's super intimidating. I remember once I was on a trip with my Bible college. I was pretty new to speaking, and we were going to different high schools, and the guy before me had done a talk, and I think going to do a talk later in the day, and some boys came up to me and they're like, "That guy who did a talk, do you like him?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, you sure? Because we'll bash him for you if you want." And I was like, "No, please don't." And I was like, "Oh man, these are the kids I got to talk to. They're threatening to beat up my friend. What are they going to do to me?" But they didn't beat me up or him up in the end, and they heard about Jesus, so that was good.
Yeah, love it. Has anyone ever thrown anything at you in any high school visit?
No, no one's ever thrown anything at me. Anyone ever thrown anything at you?
Yeah, not during a talk, just MC time.
Oh yeah.
Definitely had a couple of thongs or cheesels.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think the other part of this first episode, I'd love to move into, I guess, hearing a few of your tips into, you've been asked to do the talk, you've got to overcome the kind of fear and all of that, but then where do you start? What does like preparing that talk look like? How would you give us the Tom French School of Prep?
Right. Well, if you're in like ideal land, because I think often when you're in prep land, it's not always ideal. Like, you don't have the right conditions because you remembered it too late, and you're like, and then you're trying to get everything going. Or anyway, but in the ideal land, like, the first thing you do is pray. I think that's always important. And I try and keep in my mind whatever talks I know I have coming up. I try and be praying about them each day as I'm doing my time in the Bible and praying. Then I want to have in my mind what it is that's coming up, so I can be praying about it, not just in my preparation time, but just in general in my life, that I can be like, all right, this is what's coming. I can be praying about that. So prayer is the first place to start. Then you got to know what it is you're speaking about, and kind of narrowing that down. So sometimes people will just give you a passage, and that's super easy. So you've got the passage, and then you just read the passage, spend some time reading it, read it in different versions, and get your head around just what's going on there. But if you haven't got the passage, then you've got to at least figure out what it is that you are going to be speaking on, and how you make that decision can be really stressful. Like what? How do I know what to speak on? Because there's so much.
I've spent like the first few days just trying to pick, and then you're left with like half a day.
Yeah. So you want to be able to kind of sort that out quickly if you can. So sometimes it's useful to talk to the person who has asked you to do the talk and say, what is it that you want from this? The more you can narrow it down, the better. So if they're like, just do whatever you want, you say, well, what's going on for the group? What are you hoping to achieve? Or maybe if you're working through, a topical series, then I always say if you're doing topical series, just pick one passage, one main passage that's on the topic and work on that rather than try and cover the whole Bible in a talk, because that's a lot of work to know the whole Bible. And you're not going to be able to cover the whole Bible well in a talk anyway if you haven't had the time to prepare it. And if you've got like 10, 15 minutes for a youth group talk, you can't even do it.
Yeah, it's often when you go over and you're like, you just talk too long, and that's not good for anyone.
Yeah. So say someone is like, oh, speak on prayer. Well, then you could be like, well, let's look at every instance of prayer in the Bible. But that's too much. But if you say, all right, go speak on prayer, all right, let's narrow it down. We'll go to like Matthew chapter 7. I just did a talk on this, that's why it's in my head. But Matthew 7 to 11 is the bit where it says, asking you will receive, seeking you'll find, knock on the door will be open to you. And then the bit about, if which of you, if your son asks for a fish, will give him a snake, or if he asks for bread, will give him a stone. You're like, all right, there you go. Then you've got like this talk on prayer that's like condensed into these 4 verses, and you've got so much in there, and then you can cover that and do that well, and all the other stuff on prayer that's in the Bible, like, Jesus' prayer for the disciples, or teaching the disciples how to pray, or whatever Paul says in the epistles, all that kind of stuff. You can just leave it to other people at other times and say, I'm just going to focus on this one thing. So then, get your passage, and then if you can do that quicker, then you can just focus on that, and then you're off to the races.
No, that's really helpful, because I reckon that's often where I've been stuck over my years as a youth leader, and procrastinating and picking. But it sounds like what I'm hearing is like, it's a bit of listening to who you're talking to, and then it's trying to narrow in and then work off that.
Yeah. I'm also like, I never try and stress too much about it, because I think sometimes we can over spiritualize picking the passage. So we got to, what is it that God wants to say to these people, and what's the Spirit doing, and all that is good and important. If you're feeling a strong leading towards something, you should do it. But if you're not feeling it, or you don't feel like God's particularly leading you anyway, then don't worry too much, because he speaks through the whole of his word. And so if you pick the wrong passage, the worst that can happen is God speaks to them through another part of his word. So it's never in vain to preach the Bible faithfully, whatever you do. So you can't go too far wrong. So don't stress about it too much.
That's helpful. There's a part that you talk about in the preparation section of your book about showing Jesus as the hero. You want to give us a little insight into that for our live viewers?
Yeah, well, I think one of the big things that I often see people do is that they'll do a really good talk with good stuff to do. Like, all right, now you can go away and you can make sure that you pray, or you can go away and you can make sure that you are kind to your family. Go away and do this thing. But what the gospel teaches us is that the most important thing for us is not that we go and do stuff, but that we know who we are in Jesus and what he has already done for us. And that our identity doesn't come from, being the best Christian we can. Our identity comes from the fact that we have a God in heaven who has seen us in our sin and sent his son to live and to die and to rise again for us, and to bring us into his family. And then because of that, we get the Holy Spirit, and then we get empowered to live. And so then if you want to go and, pray better, or, love your family, or whatever it is you're called to do, you can only do that because of the good news of Jesus and because you're empowered by the Spirit. And the thing that changes us is not our hard work, but the work that's already been done for us. So I always am like, well, we need to bring this back to Jesus and ground what we're doing in the gospel, so that everything else flows out of that, so that your obedience flows out of the fact that you're a child of God, saved by Jesus. And so you don't feel guilt for not achieving the things that you set out to achieve, but you feel set free to do the things that you do because of your new identity. So that means that when you do a youth talk, you bring it back to Jesus. Show how does the gospel impact on what I'm saying here? So it's not just to go and do this stuff, but you can go and do this stuff because of what's been done for you in Jesus.
Mm. So how do you go with the tension of like the big idea that you're revealing through the passage,
Yeah.
but also Jesus to be the hero? How do you work it so that the big idea is heard, but also Jesus together? Give us a little bit more into that.
Yeah. So I think it's about like if you've got a big idea, sometimes Jesus will be right there in the middle of your big idea. And so if that's the case, then it's easy. So if it's like, your big idea is that Jesus came to save us and change us, then well, there you go. Look, it's already in the midst of it. But if you've got a big idea and it's something else, like now I'm trying to think of a big idea. Anyway, whatever it is, whatever big idea you have, you can show how Jesus impacts on that. So let's say the big idea is that pray because you have a loving Father. So the thing to do is to pray. The reason in your big idea there is because your Father is loving, and so then your question is not so much how should I pray, but why should I pray? Got a loving Father. How do I know my Father is loving? Well, because we've seen the love of the Father in His Son. So if the Father is going to be a Father who gives us good gifts, well, the best gift that we have is Jesus, and we've seen that. Like, of course, He's not going to give us a snake or a rock when we want something, when we've asked for something good, because when we ask for nothing at all, He sent His Son Jesus, and while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And so you can now go and pray because you've seen the character of God, and you can approach this loving Father because you've seen it in Jesus. Yeah. There you go.
I think, that worked. That worked well.
Great.
Well, as we're coming into the land, any other tips for our listeners and friends out there in the process of preparing that talk that comes to mind now, just as we're chatting?
I think probably a big tip in your preparation is just listen to other people. Sometimes we feel this pressure that I've got to have good things to say, and whatever you have to say in your talk will not be original, because there have been people speaking about the Bible for the last 2,000 years, and so you're not going to come up with anything new. And if you do come up with something new, then you're probably wrong and you shouldn't say it. So don't be afraid of reading books about commentaries on the passage, or talking to wise people around you, listening to other sermons, and don't be afraid of saying other people's ideas. I mean, you should credit people if it's a really clear that you've stolen it. Say, so and so said this, but listen to other people, because there's a lot of good stuff there, and you don't have to be really wise and smart. You just have to present biblical truth, and you can find that anywhere. And so look for it everywhere and share it, because that's the best opportunity that people have to grow. It's not about you, it's about people hearing what God's word and hearing it preached well. And so then you're free to just give them whatever from wherever.
Yeah, I like that. So I think it constantly means your posture is taking your focus off you, and it's trying to look at everyone that God's made and listening to them. And I imagine that's also why you're trying to pray during this preparation. And I was thinking before, I wanted to ask you, what does praying during the preparation look like? What kind of prayers is it? Is it Lord, make this talk incredible? Or what kind of prayers have helped you along the way?
So I think my prayer is that I pray for help in preparation. So I pray that I'll understand the passage. And then I pray for, ultimately I'm always praying for the outcome. So I pray that God will be glorified, and that people will be changed by what I have to say. So I want to preach faithfully. I want to ask God to be doing that. But then in the midst of it, then there are times when I pray and I'm just like, I don't understand this. God, help me to understand this. Or I have nothing to say to these people. Give me something to say. And so there's a lot of like, just as I get through to each bit, if I hit a wall, I'm like, I need to pray, and I pray. And sometimes the prayer gets answered quickly, and sometimes it gets answered, right when I'm about to preach. I'm like, oh, look, oh, now it feels like it's all there. Like maybe it's been answered a lot earlier, but then I only feel like it's been answered once I've done the talk, and people are like, oh, actually, yeah, that spoke to me. I'm like, oh, really? It felt like rubbish to me, but yeah, prayer about anything and everything. But yeah, definitely not like, can I do the great talk and be super funny and, but can you use this for your glory and to change people?
That's really helpful. I think keeping your own genuine like relationship with God as you're doing the process, that means you're, connecting with Him and working on yourself and keeping your focus on Him and other people and what God's going to do through it really helps the head and heart along the journey.
Yeah.
So this is our first little episode. As we come into land now, how do people get hold of this book, or how can we help you with this book and what God can do through it?
Well, people can get the book for free. Sorry, if you just bought it, but you can get the free PDF or iBook or Kindle, whatever that is, if you go to tomfrench.com.au/free book. That's all one word. And then
so you're giving it free. Why are you giving it away for free?
I'm giving away free because because I think it's hopefully a helpful resource for people who are using the book, who could use it. So, if it's like you've got a book, you want to help people do talks, and then they don't know about it, or they can't get their hands on it, then what use is it? So one, because I think it'll be a blessing, but two, because it's a sneaky marketing promotion. Because then I give you a free book, you give me your email address, and then I'll email you like, hey, how did you enjoy the book? Do you want to buy my other book? But that's for book marketing. We can do that on that podcast.
Awesome. Well, Tom, thanks for giving us your time. I believe we're now going to have a little time of questions.
Yes.
So those that are out there with us, get your questions ready, and Tom will be live in just a moment. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah. No worries.
Hello everyone. So we are doing the live Q&A now. There's always this bit when you do a seminar on preaching or something where you say, does anyone have any questions? And then it's like silence. And at the moment, I'm just waiting for your questions. And if you don't have any, that's fine, but I'll probably have to tell you what I had for dinner. Which is okay, but no one asked. And it's even worse than, sharing a photo of your dinner if I just have to describe it to you. But also, if you want to tell me what you had for dinner, you can stick that in the comments as well. Well, then I'll tell you what I had for dinner. It was pizza from Domino's. And we got this special deal where we got 50% off the large pizzas. And then they were like, well, you haven't spent enough money yet, so we had to buy Domino's chips. And funnily enough, the Domino's chips were not that good. You would think that Domino's, being pizza people, would know how to make great chips, but they don't. Now I've told you about my pizza. I'll probably have some cornflakes for dessert. All right, well, if anyone's got any questions, why don't you stick them down the bottom, and I will love to answer it. Gildo, I think you had a question that you were going to ask, but maybe you haven't asked it. Well, let me tell you then, if no one's got any questions, that's totally fine, but let me just plug some things for you. At the moment, we're in the middle of the Soul Survivor build-up Spring Appeal, and if you want to contribute to that, Soul Survivor haven't asked me to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. If you want to contribute to that, you should go to the link that you can find in the description. And if you go there, you can give to this great ministry. I know that Soul Survivor has been a huge influence in my life. They're great at encouraging preachers, great at building up preachers, great at helping young people to grow in their love of Jesus. So if you want to support Soul Survivor in their spring campaign, you should definitely get in on that. Their spring appeal. There's the link over to the side there. Also, if you want to get a copy of my book, here it is. There's also that link. You can get it for free from tomfrench.com.au, and you can pick it up there. Yeah. Oh, hold on. Oh, the comments aren't showing up. I'm sorry. My thing wasn't loading it. So let me go. What's your favorite book at the moment? That was what Geldo asked. My favorite book at the moment. The one that I'm reading, actually, I'm reading A History of Australia, which has got nothing to do with preaching or anything, but I've been enjoying that. And I'm reading another book at the moment. Oh, I just finished a book called Garden City by John Mark Comer, which is all about rest and work and how you can make rest and work together. So, yeah, I reckon those two. You should definitely check out Garden City by John Mark Comer, which is a really excellent book. All right, next question. What's the shortest prep you've ever conquered for a talk, and how? Well, my shortest preparation was probably when I was at a school to do a talk, and they told me that I was preaching on one passage, and then I found out that as I was sitting there that they were doing the reading, and the reading was for the passage after the one they told me that I was preaching on. And I was like, well, I can do the talk that I've prepared, or I can write a talk for the passage that they've read. And I thought in my head, I was like, I reckon I can put together a talk on the passage that they have prepared, or they've had written, they've had read. And so I just kind of, as I walked from the back of the room to the front of the room, I kind of put this talk together in my head, and then I did this talk, which was kind of half the old talk and half this new stuff. And so my shortest talk preparation time is from the back of the room to the front of the room as I began to do it. So I don't recommend that. That's probably not the best preparation, but there you go. That's my shortest preparation. What do I do with preparation time if I run out of time but I still need to do a talk? I think it probably depends what you have to speak on. Like, if you are having to speak on something that you don't know anything about, then don't try and make something up. Like, some of the best things you can do is, like, if you're like, I have not prepared at all, you go, we're going to have a group discussion. We're going to learn from everyone and read the passage, and then you maybe give like 2 minutes, like, this is something that struck me in the passage. What do you guys think? And then, get people to get in groups and chat to each other, and then feed back to you. I wouldn't try and do a talk if you haven't prepared to do a talk. I know that I just, told you what I did, but if you don't have, anything to say, don't try and say stuff. But if you've got a talk that you can do, then do it. But if you've run out of prep time, then try and do something that'll be useful for the group, even if you're not prepared. So there you go. All right, if I'm at youth group and I have to go have a go at preaching, what should I do, especially if I am nervous? Well, one is that the more preparation you do, the better you'll be ready to preach. So if you've got to preach at youth group and you know that it's coming up, then give yourself as much preparation time as possible. Read your passage early, talk to people about it, spend time with your youth pastor or whoever's in charge, and then run through the talk with it, write early drafts, and get as much preparation done beforehand. And then once you're there and it's time to do it, if you're feeling nervous, that's totally fine. You're allowed to be nervous. Feeling nervous is useful for you because it kind of keeps you focused. And if you're like, afraid when you're up the front and you think everyone can see it. They can't see it. Like, they might notice a little bit, but you notice a lot. Like, they will notice about 10% of what you're feeling. So get up there, give it a shot. If you say something wrong, just keep going. If you say something wrong and it's obviously wrong, like, you get Jesus and Satan mixed up, which I have done in the past, then you just be like, oh, look, I'm sorry, I meant to say Jesus where I said Satan. Then do that, fix that up, and then keep going. But don't focus on your nervousness, because other people aren't focused on your nervousness. Just let it be something that pushes you to do a better job. And even if your voice is shaking, no one's going to be upset. They're going to be sitting there and they're cheering you on because they want you to do a good job. Unless you've got the worst youth group in the world. But I've never met a group of people who get upset with nervous people. People get much more upset with people who are overly confident and when they shouldn't be. So, let your nerves be your friend. And now that Facebook has stopped hiding the comments from me, now I think we might be out of questions. But if you want to chuck one in, feel free to do it. Otherwise, we might wrap it up very soon. Let me encourage you one more time. Make sure you check out the Soul Survivor Spring Appeal, because Soul Survivor is an excellent ministry, and they're going to keep doing great things for young people around New South Wales, ACT, and beyond. And if you want to grab a copy of my book, grab the link to the side, and you can get a free e-copy of my book. We're going to be back here next week at 8 p.m. doing this again. So if you want to come back, we're going to be looking at how you actually write a talk. So we talked about preparation today. Next week is going to be how do you write a talk, and once we've done that, we're going to do another live Q&A. You can bring all your questions, any questions you didn't ask this week, you can bring them next week. If you're watching this after that's gone live, then come back next week, and I'd love to see you here to asking your questions. It's been great fun, everyone. Thank you very much. We will see you next week for the next session of Build Up Preachers with Soul Survivor, and funnily enough, with me. See you, folks.